Short barrels. Does 9mm beat 45 ACP? And today I have our Sig Sauer Elite Defense ammunition. So when I make that statement or I make that question, does the 9mm beat the 45 auto? You know, we're not talking overall caliber wise, we're talking specifically this particular ammo. Does the 9mm beat 45 ACP? Sig Sauer. So our 9mm is a 124 grain that is rated at 1165 feet per second, and our 45 ACP is a 185 grain. I believe that's rated at 995 feet per second. So I'm going to use my short barrels today, my 3.2 inch barrel Taurus G2C and 9mm, and my 3.3 inch barrel Smith & Wesson M&P Shield 45 2.0 to do this test, and we'll see if there's a big difference between 9mm and 45 ACP. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So our first shot here, we're going to go into plain clear ballistics, no fabric in the way or anything like that that can clog a hollow point, just to try to get our best potential for hollow point expansion. And we'll see how 9mm and 45 ACP compare. Then we'll do our real world simulation after that, where I'm going to have 4 layers of sweatshirt material on this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. In that format with the rib simulation in there, this is about a half representation of the density of flesh. So if we were to get like 16 inches in this gel, it's more like 8 inches in a real living target. So we'll do our plain clear ballistic shot, then our real world simulation shot, and then I will shoot at the scale target to get the difference in shootability and recoil and practical accuracy is and all of that. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 9mm 124 grain jacket hollow point rated at 1165 feet per second. That's probably through a 4-inch barrel. Let's see how close I get to 1165 in this little 3.2 inch barrel here. 9mm. $1,092, $1,085, 1114, 1089, 1110. So a little bit below rated velocity, but that's to be expected with such a short barrel. Now this 45 here, this is rated at 995 feet per second, probably through a 5-inch barrel, and we're only using a 3.3 inch barrel, so we'll probably lose a lot of velocity here. Let's see how close we get to 995 feet per second with our 185 grain jacket hollow point. $820, $871, $865, $867, 868. So except for that first shot, pretty consistent velocity and about what you would expect out of something like this with a standard pressure. So not too bad overall. Let's try our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, first up we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot. So no fabric in the way that could potentially clog the hollow point and prevent expansion. No rib simulation that can slow down its potential for penetration. So let's see what we get here with our 9mm 124 grain V Crown. I'll set that with our 45 ACP. Let's go take a look. All right, so I'm liking what I'm seeing here, especially with that 45. I see some rollback there, and I like that because when you get a lot of rollback like that, it generally means that bullet at one point expanded to 0.65 of an inch or bigger. It might actually shrink down to smaller than that after the fact, but yeah, it means it expanded pretty big, and I can actually see the expansion with our 9mm. First 3-inch energy dump, a little bit more with our 9mm than our 45. That's to be expected because the velocity is so much faster. and that did really well overall. We have a really nice expansion going on from that short barrel, and what we got here is about 14¼ inches. Looks really good. Now once we enter this main block, there's a little bit more damage there with the 45 than the 9mm, but it's very close. Once we get here, it actually looks like that 45 tumbled after it expanded, so interesting. What we got here with the 45 is about 18½ inches of total penetration, then the bullet rolled back. So both of these are looking good through the short barrel so far. So let's put on our fabric, put in our rib simulation, and see how these do in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of sweatshirt material on the front there. A lot of people say that's not realistic, but look, today it's not particularly warm or cold today. I am wearing this, and if you went through the arm right here, through a couple layers of this material here, and then a couple layers here like this, from a side shot, we're looking at about 4 layers of sweatshirt material. So 4 layers of sweatshirt material, I find that to be realistic, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. I like to keep these bullets within that back rib simulation, but if they go through it by about 3 inches more, it's acceptable. And you got to remember, this is a half representation of the density of flesh, so you know, whatever you see in there is going to be about half that far in an actual living target. So real world simulation, 9mm. Let's see how this does. All right, I hit that pretty hard. I have to set this back up here. Let's hit that with our 45 ACP. Let's go take a look. All right, so a lot more energy dump with that 9mm, even with the fabric in the way, a ton of it right there. And it pretty much brought the energy dump with the 45 down to basically none because of that fabric. So that did limit that 45 quite a bit. Looking at our rib simulation, yeah, our 9mm had the velocity to expand right away. Go through that, our 45 just didn't. So what we got with our 9mm is we have pretty good expansion. We have a penetration of about just shy of 14½ inches. So very consistent with what we got with our plain clear ballistic shot. Now with our 45 auto, it looks like we got a little bit of expansion right here, and then again we started to tumble right here, and then it went and hit our back rib simulation. So we have barely any expansion at all and a little bit of tumbling, and what we got there was 19 inches of penetration. So looking at this, our terminal ballistics wise, on paper anyways, our 9mm did better. Our 45 though, I wouldn't call that bad. It just didn't expand as much, but you got to remember our 45 started out bigger. So it's really hard to call this as one being better than the other here. I would say terminal ballistics wise, you know, people are going to scoff at me for this. What are you, crazy? But no, just looking at an overview, they both got good penetration. They both have pretty good bullet size, diameter, with or without massive expansion. So they both would do pretty well. The 9mm maybe a touch of an edge there. But it's really going to come down to shootability now, though. If I can't handle the 45 and I can easily handle the 9mm, that makes a big difference. So we'll find out. Let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at these bullets. Then I'll shoot our steel and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. Here's our 9mm. Here's our 45 ACP. So our 9mm got absolutely perfect expansion. Nothing wrong with that at all. That looks really good. Our 45, you know, I hadn't seen these up close when I mentioned I thought that these would have hit 65/100ths of an inch or greater. Obviously, I was seeing that wrong because there's no way that that got that big. So likely what caused it to roll back is it's probably 65/100ths of an inch this way. That's normally that limit of that gel. Once you get a projectile that big, it jumps back. So looking at, you know, we had a little expansion, then we had tumbling cutting through it. That's what caused that rollback. But the actual expansion is pretty bad with that. A lot smaller than that 9mm. Now the ones going through our real world simulation. Here's our 9mm, here's our 45. I honestly, again, thought I saw expansion with that 45. It looked expanded from the angle I was seeing it from, but it was not at all. So our 9mm still did pretty well. That's pretty typical. You compare it to the plain gel shot to the real world simulation. Pretty much all ammo does that, whether it be HST or gold dot, where it gets a little bit smaller expansion versus plain gel. So that did pretty well overall for a 9mm, and being a standard pressure, it's pretty powerful. It's not bad, you know. And our 45, just terrible here. I mean, it's terrible overall when we're talking about performance-wise. That being said, would you rather have this or perfectly expanding 32 caliber? Well, you're going to want to have that. Even my 327 Federal test, they start out at 32 or 31 caliber, and they typically only expand to 45. So if you look at it from like a real world perspective, it's still not bad. But when we look at it from a testing perspective, you know, it didn't do very well at all, because we're really looking at percentages and 1.5 times expansion, and getting 1.0 times is not good. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm just going to get a front sight picture. Actually, I'm going to line up the front and the back sight. I'm going to get a nice sight picture. Pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target, see if there's a big difference in the shootability and how long it takes for me to land them on target, see if there's a big difference in accuracy and time. A lot of people ask why I don't use a timer. That's just not me. You know, I'm the practical guy, the everyman that likes to come out here and just show this type of stuff. So I don't really think it would make a huge difference, especially if the accuracy is not the same. So I don't really gain a whole lot from doing that. So let's see what you can do here. I'm going to do 6 on target with our 9mm. See how they feel for me. 9mm. All right, those shoot really good. 45 ACP. See how this does. So I did pull some, so there's a little bit of a difference there, and that could just be a little bit of difference in the pistol. I think I may have missed one or grazed one, but overall there's a little bit of an edge to that 9mm there for shootability, but I can't say it's a huge difference. I was pulling them because I was kind of anticipating the recoil a little bit more than what there actually was. That's part of it. So let me slow down a little bit and fire from some more distance and see if there's a big difference in overall accuracy. All right, 40 yards from the target, our Dick and Drill distance. I'm going to fire off really slow though, and just see if there's a big difference here in the shootability and accuracy of 9mm versus 45 auto. So here's our 9mm. So I wasn't particularly good with that ammo. I don't know why. I mean, I wasn't trying to throw them or anything. I just didn't see that good of accuracy with that. Seems like they were kind of favoring to the right a little bit, but when I aimed to the left, I hit low left. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. 45 ACP. See how this shoots for me. So a little bit better for me here. So look at this. One thing to note, I think if I was going to be carrying this particular pistol, I don't think I'm doing myself any favors by doing testing where I'm shooting 9mm back to back with 45. Because up close, when I had that miss, really what that came from is from anticipating, just because I just shot the 9mm, and mentally I'm thinking the 45 is going to have so much more recoil. Reality, it doesn't really have much more at all, and somehow like I would pull that. And if I was just shooting 45, I wouldn't notice that at all. So there's a little bit of a difference here between 45 and 9mm. Now, looking at this for the average everyday person, would I say you should go to a 45 versus a 9mm with just ammo that's kind of comparable? I'm going to say no, because modern 9mm is very fast. You get a lot of capacity, and it expands out pretty well. It's pretty good ammo currently. The 45, here's the thing with the 45. When you get similar power ammo with the 45 to the 9mm, similar energy, it's not going to perform as well as the 9mm, because you're taking a much heavier bullet, you're pushing it slower. That causes failure of expansion a lot of times. So at that point, you're better off with carrying a 9mm. But here's the thing, when you go up to hot ammo, the 45 is going to be significantly better than the 9mm, but it comes at a cost of, you know, less capacity and a little more recoil. So really, there shouldn't be a thing where it's like 9mm versus 45, what's better, because it's not overall one better than the other. It's, you know, with certain ammo, what's the particular person, what's the particular ammo, all of that makes a big difference overall. So, but looking at this ammo, lowly loaded ammo, I'm going to say the 9mm did a little bit better. So, interesting test. That's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like. Thanks for watching.